So you're a new landlord in Massachusetts and you have no idea what you can charge to a tenant. In today's video, I'm going to quickly break down what you are legally allowed to charge your tenants in Massachusetts as a landlord. If you guys don't know me, my name is Jankowitz. I'm a realtor based in Cambridge and Somerville, Massachusetts. I've closed over 300 transactions in the last 3 years. If you guys like the content of this video, please hit the subscribe button in the link below. I always make myself available via a Calendly link also in the description below for a free 15-minute chat. So feel free to take advantage of that at any point in time. So before we get into the video, 2 quick caveats. Number 1, I'm a realtor. I am not an attorney. Do not watch this video and treat it as legal advice. If you have a legal situation, if you want to be 100% certain that you're doing everything by the letter of the law, don't come to me, go to a real estate attorney. I have a number of them that I can recommend that are excellent depending on the area that you're focused on. So reach out to me again. I'm happy to make a referral, but do not take this video as legal advice. The second thing that I want to say is laws change all the time. There's certain gray area, and due to case law, there's a certain change and shift in ways certain things are done. So understand that I am providing this information based on my personal experience and to the best of my knowledge based on what's happening at the time of the shooting of this video. And then as times change, oftentimes these situations could change. Now let's get into it. First off, what can you charge? There are 4 things that you can charge in the state of Massachusetts if you're a landlord. There's first month's rent, there's last month's rent, there's security deposit, and there's a key and lock change fee. Now let's break down all of those in much more detail. First off, you have first month's rent. And this is basically exactly what it sounds like. First month's rent is the first month's rent of the lease. So if you were to have a tenant sign a lease starting September 1st of this year and they prepay first month's rent, they are paying for September rent. That means that if they prepay when they sign the lease, say in June, on the 1st of September, they're not going to be paying rent because they already prepaid that. So you're not going to get your next month's rent, which would in this case be October rent, until October 1st. Now, when you have this first month's rent, it immediately goes to you once the lease is signed, and you are all set and good to go. It belongs to you. You can spend it how you like. You don't have to do anything special with it. It is yours and yours to keep. Next up is last month's rent. And last month's rent is very similar to first month's rent. It is now the last months of the rent. So let's say that you sign a lease September 1st through end of August of the following year. When a tenant prepays last month's rent, in this scenario, they're paying the month of August upfront. Now, if they end up renewing the lease for another year, they will pay August rent of that year, and then the last month's will now be pushed, say if it's another 12-month lease, to the next August, okay? Now that last month's rent, you get it again right away and it's immediately yours. You can use it however you'd like and it belongs to you. You don't have to do anything special. Again, you can spend it right away, but understand that whenever the last month is in the tenant's lease, whether it's that initial, say 12-month cycle, that last month, or if it's 5 years from now, the last month of that lease, the tenant will not pay because they have already prepaid it. So it's really important that you keep track of these things and write them into your lease itself. So you can always check the wording to remind yourself, did I collect last month? What did I collect? So there's no confusion between both you and the tenant. The next one is security deposit. And security deposit is a very tricky thing in the state of Massachusetts. And I see tons of owners make a mistake. I have a lot of landlords who choose not to take a security deposit. I think that's a pretty good idea. If I were to own a multifamily, I personally probably would not take a security deposit, although it's a very personal decision, and I would never push someone not to take one. I just think it can be challenging and kind of a pain. So a couple things about security deposits in Massachusetts. The first thing you need to know is that you cannot collect a security deposit that is greater than first month's rent. So if first month's rent is $2,000, the maximum that you can get as a security deposit is $2,000. It cannot be a penny over. I know in other states and other countries, I've heard of 2 months. I've heard of even 3 months, I think, of security deposit. It's in Germany, but here in Massachusetts, it cannot be equal to greater than first month's rent. So that's the first piece. Now, when you collect that security deposit, you must put it in an interest-bearing account. So what I always do with my clients, I have the tenants fill out a W-9. They take that W-9 to a local bank. By the way, the bank must be in Massachusetts. You take that W-9 with the security deposit, you hand it over to the bank, and the bank will then put that security deposit in a separate interest-bearing account. If you don't put it in a separate interest-bearing account, the tenant is then entitled to 5% of interest on whatever is in that account every 12 months. Now, that security deposit, it goes in that account. Now, every 12 months, you need to provide whatever interest is generated from that security deposit to the tenant. If you don't do that, you are technically in violation of the rules as I understand them. There is more though, we're not done yet. Now, once you deposit that security deposit, you have to get a receipt from the bank with all the account information and provide that receipt to the tenant right away. And then finally, the last thing you need to do when it comes to security deposits is you need to provide an apartment condition statement. I think this is best practice whether you collect a security deposit or not. It essentially sets a baseline that both you, the owner, and you, the tenant, agree to. So it makes sure that there's very little confusion and there's clear documentation of what the place was like when you moved in. So then on move out, you're all on the same page. And so an apartment condition statement, you want to make sure that you get that to the tenant right away. If you're working with me, I make sure it gets to the tenant right away. Within the first couple days of move-in, I recommend that the tenant fills it out. The owner will look it over. Vast majority of the time, the owner will agree and sign off, and now you have that baseline established. You must provide this though if you are providing a security deposit. Again, I recommend whether you provide a security deposit or not, it's always in your best interest to do this, both for the owner and tenant. It just builds trust and it creates a very clear baseline as to the initial condition that the tenant is receiving the unit in. And one other final piece, if you ever get into a situation where you have a security deposit, you want to take some money out of the security deposit for repairs, things can get complicated. I'm not going to get into the specifics of this video. All I will say is handle with care. Do not be nilly-willy and just plan to take everything out. My general advice is work with tenants. You want to have a good relationships with tenants and be reasonable. So try and give tenants a chance to remedy the situation and try to be reasonable. Understand that wear and tear is normal. It's not your right to have a tenant fix things that are a result of normal wear and tear. Now, there is some gray area there, but I think in general, be a little more lenient. It will be good for your mental health. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's good to treat tenants right. When you develop a good reputation, it will make your life a lot easier as an owner as well. And finally, just one other warning with security deposits. If you don't follow these rules to a T, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. I have seen it happen. I'm not gonna get into all the legal aspects, but just understand security deposits are a sticky subject and you really, really, really have to handle things with care. The final thing that you can charge as a landlord to a tenant is a key and lock change fee. And this is your cost to change the key and lock situation for that particular unit. Now, to be clear, it's your cost. Generally speaking, I find key and lock change usually is about 100, maybe 150 bucks. Occasionally, there are more complicated locks that are a little more expensive, but usually it's around there. I sometimes will see owners charging exorbitant key and lock change fees. I do not recommend that, and I don't believe that's really in the spirit of what this piece is. I think it's working in bad faith, frankly. And so I think you really should just charge what the cost is. And of course, only charge this to the tenant if you actually are changing the locks. I mean, that sounds really obvious, but I've seen owners who will try and charge $500 to a tenant when they didn't even change the locks. You can't do that. Now let's go over some of the most common mistakes I see with these upfront payments. I see these unfortunately all the time, and I always want to make sure that owners are following the rules, tenants are following the rules, and I just find that it's a recipe for success. So the first one that I see owners who maybe could be from out of state, out of the country, and they're used to collecting more than first month's rent for security deposit, and they don't realize most of the time, it's not acting in bad faith, but they just don't realize that they can't charge more than first month's rent. So make sure you're collecting security deposit. It is never more than first month's rent. The second mistake I see is that, again, most owners are not aware of all the security deposit laws, and they don't mean to, but they're unintentionally violating those laws. So if you are going to collect a security deposit, make sure you do your homework and or work with a realtor who understands how this works, and or talk with a real estate attorney who is focused on tenant landlord law who can help guide you through the process. Or alternatively, choose not to collect the security deposit. The next mistake that I see a lot of owners make is they charge an application fee. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is you cannot charge an application fee. I see owners do this all the time. I don't believe you're allowed to do that as an owner. I think it can really annoy tenants. And in this day and age, it's so easy to do a quick Google search. If you search around, you will find tenants who find this out. And it can kind of start things off on not the best foot. Again, I think most owners are working in good faith and they just don't understand it. But hopefully by watching this video, you understand you should not be charging an application fee to your tenant if you're an owner in the state of Massachusetts. The next one, which I just talked about a second ago, is I see owners charging an exorbitant key and lock change fee. Don't do this. Be a reasonable person. A, only charge the key and lock change if you change the key and lock. And B, if you do change the key and lock, just charge the tenant your cost. This shouldn't be another way to make an extra $50. It's just not the right thing to do. I don't know if it's legal or not, but I really don't think you should be doing that. Another mistake that I see a lot of owners make is they'll charge a cleaning fee to their tenants. Again, this is a bit of a gray area. I know some owners that do this. I personally think that from my understanding, it's not a good idea to pass on a cleaning fee. And I think it's something that, my personal opinion, I would build it into the cost of doing business. I think it's just the right thing to do. It's a relatively small turnover cost in the grand scheme of things. And I find by covering that cost for the next person, it can really build a nice relationship. And I find that the most successful owners that I know of and the ones that are happiest take good care of their properties and their tenants. And in return, they're rewarded with tenants that take care of the property, and everyone ends up being happy in the long run. The final mistake that I see owners make, and again, I think they're acting in good faith, but in these big buildings, these condos, there's typically a move-in and a move-out fee charged to the owner by the management company. And I often will see owners pass this fee over to the tenants. My understanding is you cannot do that. I am not an attorney, but if I owned a property and I had a move-in and move-out fee, I would eat the cost and treat it as part of doing business. Again, just my opinion. If you want to talk about this further, I'm happy to get into more detail either in the comments below. I will get into a discussion about it, or you can set up a Calendly link, and I'm happy to chat further on that one. So in conclusion, Massachusetts has very strict laws when it comes to collecting payments upfront, especially compared to a lot of other states. You want to make sure that you're fully in compliance with the law, you're doing things the right way. From my personal experience, I believe most people are good people, whether you're a tenant or an owner. I think most owners generally want to comply with the rules and just aren't aware of them. So hopefully this video will shed a little more light, get it out to more owners so they're aware of what the rules are, and then they can make a decision based on what processes they want to follow, how much time they want to put into this, and their level of risk. If anyone has questions, hit me up on the Calendly link below. I'm happy to do a free 15-minute conversation. If you guys like the content of the video, please hit that subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.